As a mum of two, my first baby was bottle fed and my second was breastfed, and both journeys had their moments. But when I made up my first bottle of formula for my baby, I remember my hand shaking as I poured the powder, his only source of food, into the bottle. I'd never done it before, and I was making it up under the pressure from the hunger scream. I can't imagine what that experience would have been like if I'd have known that I was just a few scoops away from an empty tub without any means to buy another. It feels completely unthinkable. But with the cost of baby formula going through the roof, rising up by 45% in the past 2 years, Sky News has spoken to desperate parents across the country who are going to drastic levels to make sure their babies are fed, and in some cases risking their baby's health. I'm Leah Boleto, and this is the Sky News Daily. A bit later, we'll be talking to a pregnancy and baby expert who has told us how the rocketing price of baby formula could be fueling a potential public health crisis. But first, our correspondent Tom Parmenter has been speaking to parents who are becoming increasingly desperate.
A lot of babies in different parts of the UK, and this is spread across the nation, are being put in really challenging and dangerous situations because the parents, through no fault of their own, just can't feed or afford to feed them what they need because the cost of formula is so much higher than it was. It's an essential product for some families, and the discussions around breastfeeding versus bottle feeding are well rehearsed, and it's almost a different issue to that because this is a product that families rely on. They don't have any choice over what they're giving their baby once they've decided to bottle feed. And of course, some families do a mixture of the two. But it is something that is leading parents to water down feeds so they don't put as much powdered milk into the bottles to try and stretch out the tub and make it last longer. They are, in some instances, using condensed milk as an alternative because it's cheaper. And a lot of families moving to cow's milk far earlier than they should be. The recommended guidance is that it should be around the 12-month mark when you start introducing cow's milk. But a lot of families, because it's much cheaper, just move their baby onto cow's milk much earlier. We also found parents stealing it, and you can see on the supermarket shelves all the security measures in your local supermarket, and it's something that has increased over the last year or two particularly. And yeah, people putting themselves at great risk to steal it, and also buying on the black market. This is something I didn't really think was a thing, but it is, that people are buying knockdown priced formula from dubious sources, from people who are stealing it in bulk and then selling it on. And then the online trade as well is another layer of all this, because people are on marketplace adverts looking through listings, and quite often those listings for formula tubs are well-meaning. People not wanting to put it in the bin because it's too precious to just throw away. And some of those tubs are sealed and unopened and wouldn't pose much of a health risk, but some of them are open tubs that have been used. They've had a few scoops out of them, and for whatever reason someone's decided they want to give it away or sell it. And people are buying those open tubs of formula. And we went to the Hartlepool Baby Bank up in the northeast of England, and they're just horrified by that prospect, and they were just telling us the health risks for those children.
Isn't it? Yeah.
You just don't know what is in those tubs or how long they've been opened, and that is the risk that some babies unfortunately are being put into.
So Tom, you said there people are going to extraordinary lengths to get hold of baby formula, and in some instances they're going out and they're stealing. Talk to me about some of those parents, what they said to you.
Yeah, we spoke to one mum and dad who are down in the southwest of England, and we're not using their names, and we're obviously protecting their identities for obvious reasons, because they were ready to speak to us about the fact that when the tub starts to run out and the formula is looking thin for that week, they feel that they have to resort to stealing from one of the local shops in their town. And that means the dad going out. He's worked out what he needs to do that. Has been stopped a couple of times doing it and challenged by store staff and told to put the products back, but he continues to do it because he has to feed his son. And he said he's heard that hungry scream, which is a real piercing sound that is still haunting him, really. And he's not prepared to allow that to happen again to his son. And therefore, he's doing what a lot of people would feel is beyond the pale. But his argument was that I'm going to look after my son, and that means I have to steal it. And the other thing he told us when we were down in that town by the sea was that he was meeting a woman later that day who was selling a load of knock-down price baby formula and was turning up in that town with a big bag that he knew was stolen from elsewhere, and he would be buying it for £3 a tub.
Oh, wow. So an entirely black market of selling it, stolen goods.
Yeah, we spoke to another dad up in Greater Manchester who was selling online tubs of formula, 8 of them, out of the back of his car. He'd made a video where he was showing the tubs of formula in the back of his car. And he admitted to us that I do get vouchers for my kids, but I'm not using baby formula, but I'm buying it with those vouchers and then selling it online. So you have this whole black market wrapped up in this as well, which has popped up because of the cost of baby formula. You'll have been there, and I've been there as a dad, and it's a stressful, difficult time when you're tired and you're just trying to make the right decisions. And the reticence of a lot of people to talk about this as an issue is something that we've really noticed, and we've spoken to lots of people in the background on all this who've told us some of the other things that they're having to do to try to afford baby formula. One mum that we spoke to was selling images of herself online, quite explicit images, to make the money to pay for baby formula. And all these things, it's a very multi-layered story with lots going on, but ultimately at the heart of it are British families who are really struggling at the moment, and unfortunately British babies who are being put in real jeopardy.
So this is a real problem, isn't it? It's happening up and down the country. What did you find? What is the reason that formula is so much more expensive?
It's the cost of making stuff that, of course, all manufacturers of all kinds of foods have been seeing. But in the baby formula industry, the costs, and we've asked all the big companies, and it's predominantly the big multinational companies who make these brands, what's going on. And they say, look, we understand the pressures that families are under, but our production costs are so much higher than they were. And they are trying to, in their words, responsibly raise prices to try to get that balance right between paying their suppliers, which include farmers, and also trying to make sure that families don't pay over the odds. But there is a lot of fierce criticism as to what is going on in this market. And we've got some new data from First Steps Nutrition that shows that the cheapest brand of formula has risen by 45% over the last 2 years.
Wow.
And the average across the whole market is 24% up over 2 years. So when you're trying to factor that into all the other things that you have to buy when you have a newborn baby, it's a big chunk of the weekly shop.
So listen, Tom, what are the big worries here? What's at stake here if parents are watering down formula, if they're buying it online, if, they're going out stealing it?
We went to Newcastle as part of this story and spoke to an infant feeding specialist, a consultant, Dr. Vicky Thomas, and she just pointed out to us just how vital that first 12 months is for babies and for their parents. In terms of the development of babies, their weight will treble between the day they're born and the day they turn 1. And the brain will double in size in that first year. And that is why the nutrition that babies are getting in that part of their lives is so vital. Yes, for when they're a baby, but also it puts the building blocks in place for the rest of your life and your health in future years into adulthood. And Dr. Vicky Thomas told us that this is an 80-year thing that we're setting up here with the way that we feed babies. And therefore, there is so much at stake in terms of the health of little ones. And she is in no doubt, and others too, that we are on the brink of a public health crisis in the United Kingdom because of this.
Tom, we'll come back to you in a moment, but at this point I want to speak to Clare Murphy from the British Pregnancy Advice Service. That's a charity who provides support for women and mothers, and they say the price of formula has become one of their biggest concerns.
I think this is an inevitable consequence of the kind of pricing arrangements that have been allowed to proliferate around formula milk, and I think that the issue is that it's really come to a head because of the broader issues there are around cost of living and the kind of choices that families are having to make.
And there will be some people listening who will say, look, if formula's too expensive, just breastfeed. So I know there's a bigger complication there. But for those people who say, look, you decided to have a baby, if it's too expensive, then just breastfeed.
Well, we don't live in an ideal world, do we? And there are all sorts of reasons why. And there's both physical and practical challenges. We talk about breastfeeding as being the most natural thing in the world, and for some women and their babies, it comes, really easily, and it's then the most convenient, best way possible to feed your baby. But that is a lot of women don't have that experience. Their baby may have tongue tie, which makes feeding and latching to the breast very difficult. They may have problems with their milk supply, and absolutely we need to make sure that the support services are in place for those women who want to breastfeed to be able to do so. And services have absolutely been decimated in recent years. But we also need to recognise that actually for some women it's not the right thing in the context of their lives in that moment and the needs of their baby. They may want to share care with their partner, for example, or other members of the family. They may be looking after other young children, and formula milk is a much more convenient way to be able to do that and give their other child the care they need. So I think sometimes we divorce this issue. It's absolutely one of those things that, by all means, let's make sure we have the support services in place for women for whom breastfeeding is really important, but also recognise that there are a number of issues and challenges that make it inappropriate for other women.
What are the consequences of watering down formula and introducing cow's milk too soon?
Well, it's nutritionally inadequate. That's the short answer is that if babies move on to cow's milk, if that becomes their sole drink before they're ready, if milk is watered down, it's not then got the nutritional contents that it needs for that baby to thrive and to grow and develop. This situation puts us on the brink of a public health crisis. I think if people can't afford to feed their babies adequately, if they're not getting adequate nutrition, if milk is being watered down, if feeds are being spaced out, if people are so-called formula foraging, buying tins that may be opened, online, all these things present risk. And I think we're very, we focus a lot on breastfeeding for the health of infants. And actually we think of breastfeeding as a public health initiative, that secures the future health of babies. But we need to think of this in exactly the same way, that, most babies, by the time they are 6 months, will be being formula fed. And we need to make sure there is a safe, sufficient, affordable supply of that product so that their health is not being put at risk. Formula milk is a safe and acceptable alternative to breastfeeding. It needs to be available and it needs to be affordable.
What's the solution, do you think? Is there one?
I think this needs a whole scale approach. I think we need to look at the Healthy Start vouchers, because at the moment, those vouchers won't even cover a single tin. I think we need to look, as I say, at some of the messaging around this, so that there is understanding that there is no nutritional difference between the cheaper and the more expensive product, or choosing the cheaper product is not nutritionally inadequate. And I think we absolutely need to look at some of the regulations around the sale of this. So, for instance, in Europe, following the same World Health Organization code on the marketing of breast milk substitutes, you are nevertheless allowed to you are allowed to both use and collect supermarket vouchers on formula milk. Now, I'm not saying for a moment that's the answer, but I think the fact that we can't do that in this country because it's seen as, this could be promoting, this could be discouraging breastfeeding. I mean, it's patently absurd.
Back to our correspondent, Tom Parmenter now. It's incredible, isn't it? Because I think you mentioned it. It's that tiredness, and I think particularly when you're a first-time parent, and you were double, you had twins, so it hit you even harder, I bet. But it's that tiredness, it's that doubting of your choices. It's just making sure that the baby's okay, and then on top of that list, to think about the fact that you wouldn't be able to afford formula for your baby, it's heartbreaking.
And that's why, when you put it all together like that, it does amount to being on the brink of a public health crisis, according to multiple people that we've spoken to in this. And they've also been quite grateful that we have been able to highlight it in a way to start that conversation for a lot of people, and to make sure that those who do have any influence on this, be they politicians, be they people in the industry, that it needs to be looked at. There needs to be a discussion around it, because you can't go on like this in a modern country, allowing this kind of jeopardy for the most vulnerable members of that society. And it is something that I think will perhaps certainly get a lot of focus, because it is pretty shocking. I have to say that as someone who's looked at this quite in depth for a few months, that it's shocking what is happening to British families and the decisions that they are having to make. And there will be lots of people who are quick to rush to condemn those families and say that they are making poor decisions. But just think about how much any new parent wants to make it work and wants to do the best for their baby. And every mum and dad that we've spoken to as part of this is in that boat, that they just want to do the best, but they're not being able to do their best because of the high prices in the shops.
My thanks to Tom Parmenter, Clare Murphy, and to you for listening to this episode of the Sky News Daily. This episode was produced by Emma Ray Woodhouse, and the editor is Philly Beaumont.